Hi, I'm Cheech Marin here in Pacific Palisades. Welcome to my house to see my personal collection of Chicano art. Earliest memory of art? It would have to be when I was in church, raised Catholic, and I was a little kid, and I'd look up and see in the ceiling was all painted with guys in sheets and walking around the clouds, and always there was somebody in the corner getting barbecued. So like, oh, hey, this is interesting. So that kind of informed my whole perception of art from then on. It was holy and bloody, so. I was always a collector of something since I was a kid, marbles, bottle caps, matchbook covers, baseball cards. And so I had this kind of instinct to collect. Started collecting Art Nouveau and Art Deco for a period. And then that's right around that time, I discovered these Chicano painters. They'd already been discovered, but not to a great extent. And I really identified with the art right away. I knew what it was. I knew what it was based on. I knew the techniques. And I said, these guys are and women are really good. And how come they're not getting shelf space? And so this is weird. So I started collecting their art. The Boating Party is a painting by Carlos Almaraz, but it's an homage to kind of art history. Seurat, different painters painted the boating party. There was people having lunch or strolling along the river or the wherever they were in Paris or Prague or whatever it was. A lot of Carlos's paintings were set in Echo Park and Silver Lake and Echo Park Lake, and so it was on that water, and so it was his version of it. Just like every major painter has ever painted his version of something that inspired them from before, whether it was Michelangelo or Jackson Pollock. I always call him the John Coltrane of painters, because his ability to paint on canvas was so spontaneous and so exotic, and the themes were very exotic, and sexual and religious and spiritual at the same time, and it was just. It reminded me of looking up at the ceiling of the church, all these different elements going on at the same time. Gronk was a part of the second wave of Chicano collectives called Asco, which in Spanish means nausea, because they were more influenced by the punk movement. Gronk represents the first break from figurative into abstract for Chicanos. How can you be Chicano and be abstract? What's abstract about that? Well, there's a lot of things, because he's influenced by, every time he walks out of his studio, all the disparate images that he's subjected to, and so he kept developing this abstract quality as a background to his figures. There was always a figure in front of this. And at some point, the background became so developed that he took away the figure. And you understood it from that. You could see where it came from. But he was the first one that broke through and showed that we weren't bound by any particular thing. It was always by the intention of the artist. I discovered the De La Torre Brothers, and they were at the beginning, and still are, glass blowers, and very kind of rascuache. Rascuache is a Chicano term that means made out of junk. Very wonderful, but rococo. Very early in their process, they started experimenting with lenticular art. So I kept following them, and all of a sudden they hit the breakthrough, especially with this one work, Rapture, where it's three-dimensional, and there's 2 or 3 different paintings in there depending on where you stand. And it just knocks everybody out, especially other artists when they come into the house and they see this, like, whoa, this is. They recognize that it's a breakthrough. In the words of one museum curator, when they were trying to get a show there, well, Chicanos don't make fine art. They make agitprop folk art. Okay, well, I don't think so, because I knew what great art was and what it was, because they weren't given the credit for, you can't possibly be meaning to do what you're doing. Okay, I've heard this tune before, So I started collecting their art. I'm at the point right now, after having collected it for a good many years, played over 50 museums with the collection, is that I think right now that the Chicano School of Art, because it has gone on so long and over a wide period of time, and describing the community, is probably the most important American school of art ever. So we were doing this show at the Riverside Art Museum on works on paper. Every stop along this tour, when I was touring the Chicano Visions Tour, that at every stop, the collection was slipping out of my hands. Every stop, it was, this is something that doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to them because it's their story. And so as we went along, it became more and more apparent that was the story. So like, oh, this is much bigger than I had even anticipated. You know, this has a life of its own. And every generation kind of, their first works are involved with news from the front. This is the condition of the community in my neighborhood right now. You don't get a straight line narrative of Chicano art. Okay, they went from the civil rights movement into this and that. No. It represents the sabor, the flavor of the community. And when you put all these parts together, the 360 gives you a whole picture of that community and their spirituality, what they eat, what they think, what they admire, you know. And so that keeps growing and growing and growing as the Chicano community spreads and spreads and spreads. Hey, I'm Cheech Marin, and I'm doing an interview for ARTnews magazine. I'm happy that they came to the house to see everything so it can be spread to the rest of the world. Thank you very much. $25.